People always say little girls are supposed to look up to their fathers. They're supposed to be the first man who shows you what love looks like, the first person who makes you feel safe in this world, the first hero in your story. Mine was a villain dressed in a suit. My name is Lila, and for the first 26 years of my life, I believed that my father was a hardworking, respectable man who sacrificed everything for his family. He told us that, constantly. At the dinner table, at birthday parties, at every moment he wanted to remind us that we owed him something. My mother Nadia spent her entire adult life inside the walls of that house. She cooked, she cleaned, she raised 3 children, she ironed his shirts, she smiled at his colleagues' wives, and she never, not once, complained where anyone could hear her. She was the kind of woman who carried everything quietly, the kind of woman the world forgets to notice. Until the day my father decided she wasn't useful to him anymore. I still remember the morning everything began to unravel. I had come home for the weekend. It was my younger brother's birthday. And when I walked through the front door, the house felt different. Hollow. Like all the warmth had been drained out of it overnight. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table. Not cooking, not moving. Just sitting. Her hands were folded in her lap, and her eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see. There was a white envelope on the table in front of her. I didn't need to open it. I sat down beside her. I took her hands in mine. And for the first time in my entire life, my mother cried in front of me. Not softly, not quietly. She cried like something inside her had finally broken open after years and years of holding itself together. "He's filing for divorce," she whispered. "He says the house is in his name. He says I have no rights. He says I'll get nothing." I felt something ice cold move through my chest. But then she said something that made my blood run cold in an entirely different way. "Lila, there's something I never told you. Something I should have told you years ago." She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and placed a small folded piece of paper beside the envelope. I unfolded it slowly. And that was when I realized my father hadn't just betrayed my mother. He had built his entire life on a lie. And that lie was about to destroy him.
I need you to understand something about my father. He was never a loud man. He didn't shout. He didn't throw things. His cruelty was quiet, the kind that leaves no bruises, no evidence. Nothing you can point to and say, "Look what he did to us." For 31 years, my mother had been his partner, not just in the emotional sense, in the financial sense too. Before they were married, my maternal grandfather had passed away and left her a significant inheritance: land, property, savings. My mother was not a woman who came from nothing. My father knew that. And that was exactly why he chose her. The paper in my hand was a record, a partial one, barely legible, written in my grandfather's handwriting, showing that my mother's inheritance had been used in the early years of their marriage to purchase the family home. The very home my father was now claiming was solely his. But there was more. Over the years, my mother had quietly kept records. Not in any organized way. She wasn't that kind of woman. But tucked inside old notebooks, folded into the pages of recipe books, sealed inside envelopes at the back of her wardrobe, there were receipts, bank documents, letters. A paper trail she had built without even knowing she was building it. Because she trusted him. And he had spent 31 years slowly, carefully, legally, moving every asset into his name alone. I sat across from my father that same evening. He didn't know what I knew. He sat at the head of the table where he had always sat, drinking his tea, looking perfectly calm, like a man who had already won. "Your mother is being emotional," he said. "She'll be fine." I looked at him and I felt something I had never felt before. Not anger, not grief. Something colder, something focused. "I'm sure she will be," I said. I spent the next 3 weeks doing nothing but working.
I contacted a family law attorney, one who specialized specifically in financial abuse cases within marriages. I scanned every document my mother had saved. I built a file. I documented everything. My father had hired an expensive lawyer, the kind who wears a pressed suit and speaks in smooth, rehearsed sentences, the kind designed to make the other side feel small.
The day of the final hearing, my father walked into that courtroom like a man attending a ceremony in his honor. He was dressed well. He shook hands with his attorney. He sat down and folded his hands on the table and looked straight ahead, with the expression of someone who has already calculated the outcome and found it satisfying. I sat behind my mother. I held her hand under the table. The judge was a woman. Quiet, sharp, the kind of person who has heard every version of every story and has learned to hear what is underneath the words. My father's lawyer spoke first. Property was in his name. 31 years of marriage, yes, but no formal documentation of contribution. His client had been the sole provider. His client deserved to keep what was his. Smooth, rehearsed, confident. Then my mother's attorney stood up. She placed the signed agreement on the record, the document from the early years of marriage that clearly showed the inheritance funds had been jointly contributed toward their shared home, with my mother named as co-investor. She presented the 2 decades of financial records. She presented documentation of asset transfers that had occurred without my mother's knowledge or consent. And then she used a word I will never forget. Financial abuse. The courtroom shifted. My father's lawyer began to object. My father leaned over and started whispering. But the judge raised one hand, and the room went silent. She read through the documentation quietly, the kind of silence that has weight in it. When she looked up, she looked directly at my father. And the expression on his face, the calm, the certainty, the quiet smugness, it dissolved, just like that. The judge ruled in my mother's favor. The family home was awarded jointly. A significant portion of the marital assets, the ones my father had moved, transferred, quietly hidden.